And that is the tea, my friends, okay? What's up, book friends? I am Addie, and you are now watching Books and Tea Time, and today we are going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in the fall, in the autumn, whatever you call it, you know? I've got my Jack Skellington mug. I'm drinking some pomegranate green tea from the brand The Republic of Tea. We have so many books to wrap up today and a lot of things to say about them. So we should just jump right in and get started. So I have my laptop here with some stats, and we're going to be doing something new today, and we're going to do this by genre. So I broke it down into 4 different genres. If you've seen any of my wrap-up videos before, you know that I always do them on a seasonal basis, but I am willing to be flexible with the organization. So do you like them by genre? Do you want them by star rating? Do you want them chronologically in the order that I read them? Also, something new that I started to do this time is I now am keeping a reading journal just like on a trial basis, and I actually really like this, and I think it's gonna help me do better at wrapping up these books because sometimes I just don't remember stuff, or I don't remember enough useful information about a given book. But now I just have been keeping a reading journal, and it's very simple, very straightforward. It's just like 2 pages. I draw a little like thing at the top. For example, this is Words of Radiance, so I just drew this little fancy thing at the top. I always keep track of the author and the rating that I gave the book, and then I'll just make some notes on this page and the back page, and then the next one will start the next book. So it's very, very simple, but it's helping me to keep track of things so that I remember what to say, because I read Words of Radiance in September, or I finished it in September, like the first week. So if it weren't for how much I loved that book, I don't think I would remember enough like detailed information to tell you. So I am going to be referencing this a lot, starting off with my fall stats. I haven't really done a lot of stats before, but we're just going to quickly go over it. So I read 23 books between the first week of September and the very last week of November. 9 of those books I listened to on audio, and 12 of them were books that I got from my library, either on Libby or in the physical. And I read 8,688 pages over those 3 months. The longest book that I read was Oathbringer. No surprise there at all. And the shortest book that I read was the first book in the Binti trilogy by Nnedi Okorafor. That's that. Those are the stats. So yeah. Genres that I have are fantasy, science fiction, romance, and graphic novels. So I did go by what I think it fits best with, but like for example, there is a graphic novel that is a science fiction book, but I put it with graphic novels. If you think that a book is not in that category, feel free to let me know down below, but again, it's just a general like the top category that I thought that it would fit in, you know what I mean? But let's just start with fantasy. As I said like 2 minutes ago, the very first book that I read was Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book in the Stormlight archive. I have been doing a series on my channel where I do spoiler reading vlogs for all these. So if you've read this book and you would rather go watch that, I really dive deep into my thoughts. I do summaries of each section. I do summaries of the interludes and reactions to all the spoilery content and talking about things. So if you're a Stormlight fan, a Stormlight reader, definitely check that video out. Yeah. So I read this and I absolutely loved it. This is a fantasy masterpiece. It's my favorite in the series so far, although I did not read Rhythm of War. This is an epic fantasy series by Brandon Sanderson. As you can see, they're thick babies. The Way of Kings is right here, as you can see. Still very chunky, and we're gonna talk about Oathbringer in a little bit, but as I said, this is the longest one. This is like 1,200 pages. It's a big book. As far as plot goes, as far as pacing goes, as far as character development and character relationships go, world building, and just general storytelling, this is my favorite, and it's one of my favorite books, one of my favorite fantasy series. It is so well done. The care and detail that Brandon Sanderson puts into these books is phenomenal. It boggles my mind. I cannot understand how he thinks of the smallest details. Like, this world is built from nothing, and it expands into this incredible and detailed and colorful place that is like nothing like our world really at all. It's so impressive how much he does, how much he thinks of, and how like each page is important. Like, these books are long, but they don't feel long. I've said this so many times, but I fly through these books and it doesn't feel like a trek. Like, I'm like, oh my god, I have 100 pages, I have 500 pages left, like I only read 100 pages today and I barely made a dent. Like, no, every page is important. Every page, every sentence adds something to the world, to the story, to the characters, and it pulls you in and makes you never want to leave. So I obviously highly, highly, highly recommend this series. As for specific things in Words of Radiance, there's so much action and emotion in this book. I always like explain this, like, the Way of Kings is the setup. It's you getting introduced to the characters, to the world, to what's going on. This book is the book of action, and Oathbringer is like the slowdown in the politics and the consequences of a lot of things that happen in this book. Shalyn is my favorite character, and we get so much of her backstory in this book. The flashbacks for Words of Radiance are from Shalyn's perspective, and she is just like one of my new favorite characters of all time, and she's my favorite character in the series. So seeing so much of her, I think, is another reason why I love this book so much, is because we get to see so much of her. This is 1,100 pages and I read it in 8 days. If that doesn't tell you that this book is worth reading, I don't know what will. If you like high fantasy, if you like world building, if you like character work, character development, mental health representation in your fantasy, if you have the patience to read 1,000 pages, that's something that you need to have to do this. Even though I don't think it's difficult, you still have to be a person who is okay with like buckling down and like realizing that you're gonna be in this world for a long time, if you know what I mean. Like, to me, that is exciting, but I know there are some people who can't or don't prefer to do that, you know what I mean? And if you need something that is bingeable and will get you out of our world, out of your head, will take you to another place and just transport you, this is absolutely the book for you, or the series for you. The first book is The Way of Kings, so don't start with this one because it is the second book, but it's so good. And I can't recommend it enough. The next book in the fantasy category is Edgedancer, which is the novella between Words of Radiance and Oathbringer. So there's a novella that you have to read before you start Oathbringer and after you finish this book. It's called Edgedancer, and it follows Lift, who is probably... I love Shalyn, but Lift is also a contender for my favorite character because she is hilarious. She's so funny. She's the sweetest, most entertaining character to read. I love her. I just want to be her friend. I've never wanted to befriend a fictional character more than I want to befriend Lift. She's so adorable and funny and just like unfiltered, carefree. She just does her own thing and she's amazing. So as I said, this is a novella between books. It's very heartwarming and amazing, and really I think this book is just to give us more insight into Lift's character going into Oathbringer and to build on the world a little tiny bit. Like, I liked this personally because I like Lift, but as far as novellas go and as far as like the purpose of novellas go, I don't really think this adds as much as other novellas do to a series, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's necessary, but I'm not mad that it's there personally because I love Lift. But like, my dad, for example, is a person where he's just like, I just want to read the next book. I don't want to be bothered with novellas and small things. But me, I will eat up every sentence that Brandon Sanderson writes. Personally, I do think that Brandon Sanderson thrives when he's writing long fiction, but again, it's a little formulaic in terms of plot, but Lift is such a lovable character that it doesn't bother me. Okay, I promise we're not going to talk about Stormlight this whole time, but the next book that I read in the fantasy category is Oathbringer, which is book 3. Again, longest book that I read. It's a chunky monkey. I'm not going to lie to you, but I read it so quickly because it's fantastic. Again, I have a whole video, so if you've read this book and you want to watch that video, that would mean the world to me because I put so much effort into those videos because I have so much fun with them. I forgot to give you star ratings. Obviously, this was a 5 out of 5 stars. Fantastic. Perfection. Literally could not be better in any way, shape, or form. And I think I gave Edgedancer 3.5 stars. Oathbringer, I gave a 5 out of 5 stars also. Are we surprised? No, we're really not. It's probably my least favorite so far, but that is definitely a personal thing because, like, the character whose backstory that we get in this book is one of the lower on the tier of my favorites, if that makes sense. Dawnshard, if you read this series, is like, I like Dawnshard, I like reading about him, but is he my favorite? No. So we get a lot of him in this book, but let me tell you, the last 100 pages of this book are so good. It's like cinematic reading this book. Like, I could see it. I could see play by play everything happening, and I could see it happening on a big screen. Like, it was so entertaining and well written. But like the first 1,000 pages before you get to the end is a lot of politics and a lot of political maneuvering and a lot of the consequences and things happening from the end of Words of Radiance. It feels very like Avengers-esque, so if you're really into like Marvel and like that coming together, like Justice League, Avengers kind of stuff, that's how the end feels, because you've got all these characters that you've been meeting individually and then they're coming together and there's like this epic battle scene, and it just, like I said, it feels very cinematic in that sense. And definitely so entertaining, so enjoyable. I really loved that. And then after that, I read the last book I promised that we're going to talk about in the Stormlight Archives, but I read the novella between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, which is Dawnshard. This one adds to the world. This one felt necessary going into the next book. We're following a side character that we get in the interludes, much like we are in Edgedancer, but to me, it builds out the world in a very sneaky and interesting way. It's like a side mission in a video game, but a side mission that adds to your understanding of the main plot. Does that make sense? Because it's very much, you're learning about a lot of things that have only been hinted at in like 1 or 2 scenes in the main books. And I felt like I was more well equipped to read Rhythm of War after reading this book. I also love Ryzen, and I'm really, really excited that we got to see her character in this book and you get to know her more. That was really fun to like be in her head and to see more of like the bridge crew, Lopin, etc. So that was really interesting. I am still left with many, many questions after the ending of Dawnshard. I gave this one a 4-star. Now I promise we are done talking about Stormlight for this video. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Wow, I just realized looking, the last 2 books in this category were both really bad. So this is gonna be fun. So I actually have a video where I talk in great depth about this book, my Halloween vlog, so I'll have a card to that and I'll have it linked in the description, but let's just talk about it. Plain Bad Heroines was such a letdown for me for various reasons. I read this in October trying to feel the Halloween vibes, and this is a book that is way too long. And I can say that, okay? As someone who reads books this long and likes books that are this long, when I tell you this book is too long, you know it's not just because I was too lazy to want to read it. It's because it was bad, okay? I do not recommend it. I do not like it. It's repetitive to the point of wanting to pull your hair out. There is this constant thing where the narrator references the readers, like says, reader, blah, 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 readers, blah, blah, blah. It happens like it happens 1 every 5 pages. Like, let me just say that. And that is not an exaggeration. I swear to you. It is so often, to the point where it is like redundant and unnecessary and just irritating, and it's constantly pulling you out of the narrative and just making me question why I did not DNF this book. They beat you over the head with the motifs trying to like make it seem natural. Like, it's not put in the text in a natural way where you start to notice it over time. It's like they beat you over the head with it so there's no way you leave the book without noticing it, which it's just not subtle enough to be impressive, and it's like so obvious to the point of irritation. It's way too long. Let me just, I know that I said this, but this book needed to be edited at least 200 pages shorter. It's 600 pages, and there's just so much unnecessary crap. There are footnotes that are like a page long, and the footnotes don't even need to be there. Also, the plot I was just not a fan of. So this is like, I have it in the fantasy category, but it's also more horror. I just didn't have a horror category. But it's also like not really horror. I don't even know what I would categorize this as, to be honest with you. It follows a dual timeline. So there's a story in the past set at a boarding school, which is interesting. If this book was just about the past, I think I could get past the writing style and enjoy it to a point where I would give it a decent rating. But there's also a timeline in the present where there's a filming crew that goes to this boarding school, which is now closed down, and they are filming a movie about the events that happened at this boarding school in the past, where 2 girls mysteriously die, and then there's a few other mysterious deaths that happen after that. There's like 6 other plot threads that are like kind of woven in here, some of which don't even make sense in relationship to the other plot threads. It's so frustrating. I really strongly disliked every single character from the present timeline. I did not like any of them. I thought they were very flat and just kind of irritating and unlikable, and the whole movie plotline did not make any sense to me, because like it was like they were trying to film like a mockumentary but also filming a movie. Like, I'm sorry if you liked this book, but for me it was a chaotic mess. It's a decent idea with poor execution and a second plot that makes no sense. That's what I'll say. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars, and frankly I think that's kind of generous. So, last and not least, but it's definitely down there, is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. I don't know what anybody is talking about when they talk about this book, because I have heard really good things about this Beauty and the Beast retelling, okay? It's an urban fantasy Beauty and the Beast retelling where the girl is from like our world in Washington, D.C., and she is like kidnapped and accidentally transported to this parallel universe that is like very fantastical, Beauty and the Beast-esque. And our other main character, the male love interest, is a prince with a curse in this castle, and that's where the Beauty and the Beast elements come in. I have heard people raving about how good this is. This is trash. I have written down that I gave this 2.75 stars. I don't know what the hell I was talking about. This is a 2-star, 1-star at best. This is not good. This is another thing where I'm very, very irritated and nitpicky about the writing. There are so many cringeable moments in this book. The writing just, it's constantly like making me physically cringe. Physically. Like, I was like, ugh, no, what? Who says that? Who thinks that? Who writes that down? And who read that and said, yep, that's good, send it off to publication? Like, I wish I had an example, but I was literally too busy just trying to get it over with to like put sticky tabs in here. If the not like other girls thing irritates you, this book is like the exact definition. Like, if I had to provide an example definition of the not like other girls trope for someone who didn't know what that was, this is the book that I would tell them to read. Like, Harper's so special. She's so different. She challenges me, but the other 200 women that I tried to court to break this curse, oh, they were so basic. There's a very unconvincing and forced love between the 2 main characters. She literally has more written chemistry, like, on page. This is something that is, like, acknowledged by other people in the book, by Harper and Ren, who are the main characters. She has more chemistry and more in common with Ren's bodyguard than she does with Ren, and all of them accept that. But Ren still, like, falls in love with her, and she still falls in love with him. I'm like, what the hell is going on? It's like a failed love triangle, and I don't even like love triangles, but it would have made more sense. It's just, it's so dumb. It's weird. It's really weird. No steam at all, which I guess maybe that's a YA thing, but some people, like, I feel like I was led to believe that this was a very, like, you know, saucy Beauty and the Beast retelling. Like, no. I don't even think they kiss. I think they, like, brush lips one time. Ren was stale and boring, Harper was annoying and cringy. Honestly, the only commendable thing about this book is that the author writes a main character who has cerebral palsy, and she writes Harper in a way that she does not allow that to prevent her from being badass. What irritates me is that her being headstrong and badass is a not like other girls thing, and it's not just her personally persevering and being who she is and just being this like rich detailed character. Like, the other writing doesn't allow for her to be an interesting character, but I do appreciate that we have a main character who has cerebral palsy, because I haven't been exposed to characters like that before, and it was nice reading that representation. I wish that we got a little more of it. Honestly, there were times where like I forgot because it's not mentioned for like 100 pages at a time, and then all of a sudden someone mentions it and I'm like, oh yeah, interesting. I don't recommend this unless you live for corny, angsty YA trash. If you do, or if you know someone who does, maybe. But I will be unhauling this ASAP. Moving on, we just have 3 in the sci-fi category. So first and foremost, I read All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries, and we are following a like robot human hybrid character. They are like composed of partly organic matter, but like mostly it's a robot. Before the story starts, this robot has hacked their governor module that tells it what to do, and it basically becomes a rogue murder bot, but instead of like breaking free and murdering people, it just watches cheesy sitcoms and consumes books and TV shows and movies in its spare time when it's not like on a job, which in and of itself is such a funny and interesting concept. I really liked this. It's a very short book, and I've mentioned this before that I struggle with novellas because I'm a character driven person. So I like the character development, and oftentimes it's hard for that to happen in a novella. But I really did like this one. It was definitely really, really fast paced at times, which I think a lot of people will enjoy. Other times it slowed down a little bit, and I think that was what I really liked. And I did like how much we get to know Murderbot and its quirky side and its personality, and seeing it interact with other humans and how that complicates its idea of self and personhood. It's really interesting. I do like it a lot. I think the other books in the series are going to be really good. I'm in the middle of the second one right now, and I am enjoying it. In this first installment, Murderbot goes to another planet with like a team of scientists who is collecting data on this planet that is supposed to be uninhabited, and Murderbot is kind of there as their security to protect them from the flora and the fauna and other people. And it kind of also has like an undercurrent of mystery thriller to it, because there is some stuff that happens on this planet that they were not expecting. I read this as part of my sci-fi taste test vlog. Actually, all 3 of the books that I'm about to mention, I started or finished in that vlog. So if you want more, I'll have a card to that video as well. Trying to get into sci-fi a little bit more, read a little more. So I started with a couple like short novella size sci-fi to just get, again, like a taste test going. So I highly recommend it. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I think if you like the android, robot, AI main characters, that's really interesting. Non-human POV, short and sweet sci-fi, a little bit of violence, and some mystery elements. After that, the shortest book that I read was Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. I have been really wanting to read more Okorafor this year. Binti is a like series of short novellas also, and this follows the main character Binti, and she basically gets accepted into this very prestigious academy in the galaxy, like the most prestigious academy in the galaxy. But in order for her to leave, she's kind of having to betray her people who stay on planet, and so it's this very big decision. And at the very start of the book, she is leaving under the cover of night, like running away to follow this destiny that she has for herself and to pursue her dreams. And so we see a lot of tension for her with that, with struggling with this decision going forward and understanding what this means for her and the rest of her life, but also just how she's brave enough to make this decision is really cool. But basically the entire plot of this book takes place on the spaceship while she's traveling to this prestigious like galaxy school that she's going to, and her ship is hijacked / attacked by an alien species that human beings have been at war with in the galaxy. And so it's her having to hide away from them and interact with them and finding out that she can communicate with them. So it's very, very interesting. It's a very cool sci-fi world. I'm excited to see that world built upon a little bit more in these next 2 books. I'm excited for the school setting because we haven't gotten there yet as of the end of the first book. It's very expertly crafted. In the small number of pages that you get to look at the culture and the politics. In terms of world building, you get a lot of like the culture of different peoples, specifically our main character Binti and her people. They have this particular clay that they make that they put on their skin and in their hair, and that is actually tied to how she's able to like communicate with these aliens. It's very, very interesting and unique sci-fi element there that I really enjoyed. But Nnedi Okorafor is so skilled at writing that like cultural and political tension and context and interaction in such a short number of pages, and to see her interacting with aliens too is really neat. I was a little bit confused by the conflict at first, and it kind of wraps up a little bit towards the end, but I feel like a little more backstory might help, so I hope that we get that in the next books. But I really liked it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. If you like short sci-fi or just sci-fi in general, the alien, human, political, and cultural interaction and conflict, black girl magic, black girls in STEM fields, that's a great representation that we get here, as Binti is going to this very prestigious university and she's going to study science. The school acceptance, school setting trope, I think, over the series is something that you'll definitely see. So yeah, that was Binti. And then last but not least, for the science fiction category, I read A Psalm for the Wild Built. Here's my little drawing. I was very proud of this because I did a little robot and a little tea monk. So this is the first book in the Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers, and I loved this book. This is such a unique and heartwarming book. It's unlike anything else that I've read. It's another really short book. It is a novella. I listened to it, but I do actually have the physical now because I got it so that I could annotate it. I haven't read it the full way through to annotate like a second time around, but I am going to eventually finish that. So this book follows our main character, Dex, who is a tea monk, and basically, well, at the beginning of this book, they are part of a different order of monks, and they're doing their thing, going about their day, and then over time they realize that they are missing something, and this sense of fulfillment is missing from their life, and they want to travel and get out more, so they decide to become a tea monk. And basically a tea monk is a person who travels around to different towns, and they sit down and they sell tea and then kind of talk people through their problems, whatever that may be. Someone comes and it's just a judgment-free zone where they can enjoy their tea, and the tea monk will personalize the tea to that person's needs based on what they're going through. It is the most entertaining and sweet and wholesome concept ever. Like, I wish that this was real so that I could be a tea monk or go to a tea monk. Like, brilliant. So our main character Dex decides to become a tea monk and to travel, and as they are going through their travels, they're realizing that they still feel like they're missing something, and they fixate on this idea of wanting to find crickets and listen to crickets. This does take place a little bit in like a futuristic world where robots have become sentient, and then this treaty happens where robots and humans decide to like kind of split the world, split the land. And so robots are confined to the wilderness, to the wild areas, and then human beings are in other areas that are more urbanized, have like towns, cities, things like that. So Dex, who again is our Teen Monk main character, really wants to travel to one of the places where the human beings haven't been in a very long time to see if they can find any crickets there, to see if crickets are still there so that they can hear them and experience this. And while they're traveling, they meet a robot who is actually on its way to talk to humans because they haven't talked to humans in like a very, very long time. I want to say like hundreds of years or something. So Dex and Moscap, which is the robot's name, are the first human/robot interaction in a very long time. And so Moscap starts to travel around with Dex and learn about humans and what human beings want. That's their goal, is to figure out what human beings want, what they need, and it's really, really good. Yeah, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's right up my alley with the whole Teen Monk vibe, so I realized that probably boosted my rating a lot too. But the whole idea of like the musing on human needs and desires is so interesting. I loved Moscap and Dex's interactions and like their unlikely friendship bond that they form together. If you like the robot-human interaction trope, humor, philosophy, the futuristic kind of like not dystopian but also not utopian setting, it's an interesting mix. If you're a tea lover, this is a great book to read, and the personal journey, self-discovery in this book is also really nice. So yeah. Next up, we have graphic novels. First up for graphic novels, I read On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden is like a space opera graphic novel. It is science fiction. It's set in space. Our characters are traveling through space, and it's kind of a dual timeline, or like more so it takes place in the present and we get these flashbacks to the past. But it's about our main character, whose name off the top of my head I cannot remember. And after graduating from like school on this like floating school place, our main character joins this group of people who travels and refurbishes and like HGTVs places in space, basically. So they like go and rebuild planets or areas, not whole planets, but like areas, buildings on planets or buildings in space that have been destroyed. So there's a found family element. It's really sweet. There's great representation. We have trans characters in this book. There's a sapphic romance element at its core. But this book is more so about people and about that like second chance romance and that love story, and it's set in space. So it's like the found family, the romance, the second chance elements. So it's not a whole lot of world building, it's not a whole lot of like sci-fi elements, but there are beautiful illustrations of these ships that look like fish that kind of just like float through the sky. So I really love the setting, and I don't mind at all that it's not like hardcore sci-fi. So it's very like soft space opera-esque. The color palette is beautiful. It's very relaxing, cool tones, and then like there will be just like really bright orangey pink pages every once in a while, but like the blues and purples that like dominate most of the pages are really nice. It is a little predictable at times, and I would have liked to see more and learn more about the politics of certain worlds. It is a little slow at times, and honestly does get a smidge boring, but for the most part, it was really intriguing and heartwarming and just a nice, pleasant reading experience. I like the characters. Overall, it was a really cool graphic novel. I gave it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. And I definitely recommend it if you like sci-fi, graphic novels, slow burn romance, second chance romance, found family, coming of age stories, lots of queer stuff. And if you like Paper Girls, I think that you'll like this. It's kind of a longer, extended version of Paper Girls. Obviously the plot's different, but like the vibe of Paper Girls, you know what I mean? Next, I read Heavy Vinyl Y2KO. It's the sequel to the Heavy Vinyl series by Carly Houston. It's a really sweet 90s series about a girl band that moonlights as a fight club. And there's like a whole plot where like this music company, like this corrupt music company, is trying to brainwash people into just listening to like the man's music. but the girls don't want that to happen, so they enter this contest, and they're a band, but they're undercover investigating it. It's really cute. It's sapphic, 90s fun. I love the idea of the girl band meets Fight Club. It's very fast-paced, almost too fast-paced for my taste. Surface level kind of stuff, you know, like it's a very cute YA graphic novel. It doesn't do a whole lot for me personally, but it is cute. I'm glad that I read it. I do recommend it if you like the girl power, sapphic, young love, teenage stuff, the 90s vibes. Again, if you like paper girls, you'll probably like this. Next, I read Through the Woods, which is a series of short horror stories in graphic novel form. It was definitely creepy. I read this in October as like a Halloween vibe. Definitely really, really creepy. The illustrations are very eerie and disturbing. It's a great Halloween time read. It's very nice and quick for the season with like the different short stories. The stories were scary and sometimes gross, but they're not super detailed, so they don't really stick with you that much. Like there's really only one that I can remember well, there's two that I can remember, and those were definitely my favorites. I do recommend it, but I don't personally think that it will like blow you away, but it's a great October read if you're feeling fast, fun, spooky stuff. I gave that one, I don't think I told you what I gave Heavy Vinyl. Heavy Vinyl I gave 3 stars, and Through the Woods I gave 3 stars. Solid, middle of the road stuff. Next, I read Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This was a fun time. So Fangs is also a graphic novel, and it is a love story between a vampire and a werewolf. It's very much like little snapshots of their romance more than it is like a consistent plot with a beginning, middle, and an end. It's kind of just like you see them meet, and then you see them hanging out, and you see their romance progressing. There's lots of puns that relate to like werewolves and vampires. It's very, very cute. I read it in 1.5 hour lunch break, so you will read it very quickly because it is like zooming, like it's almost like a comic strip style more than it is a graphic novel, honestly. It's adorable. It did make me giggle. It is very cute. There's a scene where like they're reading different books, like they're reading Dracula and Interview with a Vampire, and then they're reading Twilight, and the girl vampire is just like laughing and pushing him away like, oh, this is so silly. That was very entertaining. Again, a great read for spooky season, or honestly just anytime. If you like the toony comic style, if you don't mind that there isn't a lot of plot and it's more just for entertainment value, if you're into the puns and the corny Halloween jokes and vampires and or werewolves, I think you'll really like it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really solid. I quite enjoyed it. After that, in the graphic novel category, I read A Map to the Sun by Sloan Leong. So in this graphic novel, we are following a set of friends, of teenage girls that go to a high school in a low-income community, and many of them come from low-income households. So on the surface, we're seeing they're dealing with that. They're dealing with high school. They're dealing with classes, grades, with friendships, with how things have changed over periods of time from when they were younger till now. You're seeing them deal with relationships, but all of these girls are strung together, and their storylines and their connections are strung together not only by their friendship but also by the fact that they join a basketball team. So one of the teachers who is new to the school wants to start a girls basketball team, and they are like fighting for this spot with the boys basketball team because there's like only a certain amount of money that the school can allot to sports. So them having to be good and get attention, and that pressure of that is definitely an element of this, but they're strung together and connected by the storyline of basketball, but it's not as heavy hitting on like basketball terminology or like basketball practice in the games themselves. Like there are panels of that where you see them playing and where you see them practicing, but for the most part it's about their lives and their individual coming of age stories and how they're all happening on a parallel track, but they're very different. It's not at all what I expected, especially from the cover, because it's a very colorful color, and the pages, the color palette's very colorful, but it's definitely a lot more heavy hitting. Definitely look up content warnings for this one. much more emotional and intense than I would have guessed it to be. It's not so heavy YA that it bothers me, but it definitely does take some effort to put yourself back in that time of your life, in high school, in that mindset, and to connect with these characters. It does take that effort, but once you do that, it is absolutely worth it. And like seeing their lives through that lens. The art style is gorgeous. The way that the panels like weave together and bleed together, it's so expertly done. I love the representation of how basketball brings these girls together and encourages them to grow and change alongside each other and helps them to cope with different things that are happening in their lives. So I highly recommend it. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. If you like YA graphic novels, the high school setting, basketball, although again, it's not super heavy, so if you're not into the basketball or you don't know as much about it or care as much about it, I wouldn't let that turn you off from the book, because I don't think it's so overbearing or so present that you wouldn't get other things out of it. If you are into the emotional story, personal growth, coming of age stuff, friendship, found family, and the amazing art style, you cannot go wrong with that. Highly, highly recommend. Last but not least, in the graphic novel category, we have Pretty Deadly Volume 1. What a surprise. I was so pleasantly impressed and surprised by this book. I knew that I wanted to read it. Sorry, I have it right here. I knew that I wanted to read this. I got it at Half Price Books for like $5. It was a total steal. Holy smokes, is this good. I cannot wait. I already placed holds on the library on volumes 2 and 3. This is something that I would describe as like a horror fantasy western. Like all of those genres kind of bleeding together and interacting and creating some magic. The storytelling is very impressive. It's very immersive and probably the best storytelling I have ever encountered in a graphic novel, if I'm being honest. It takes so many turns, but it expertly guides you, and it's just so cool. I really, really highly recommend this. I think it's amazing. It is super graphic, both in terms of like sex and gore, so be prepared for that. There's nudity and so much blood. It was a little confusing at first, but by the end, everything weaves together very seamlessly. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. If you like horror, fantasy, western vibes, any of those, all of those, definitely check this out. If you like short graphic novels that grip your attention on page 1 and hold it until the end, absolutely the case with this one. If you're okay with the gory and violent art depictions in this book, really good. Definitely recommend. Check it out. Last but not least, we have the romance category. I don't know what happened to me. I read 2 romance novels in 2020. I have read more romance books this year than any other, and I read 8 romances in the fall months alone. So, romance. Let's talk about it. The first romance I read this fall was Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This book is good, but not great, okay? It's cute. It's a cute male-male romance. It is really funny. I will say that's probably my favorite thing about this there are like laugh out loud moments. It's an entertaining book. There are some elements of it where like I had to suspend my disbelief for. For example, our main character works for a dung beetle foundation. They like raise money to save dung beetles, I think. I don't know. I was just like, okay, fine, it's quirky, whatever. One of my biggest qualms with this, and that I'm realizing, I've mentioned this a couple times already, but I like dual POV romances. That's just my preference. I like when we get both sides of the romance, because I think that oftentimes when it's single POV, it becomes a problem for my enjoyment of the story and my understanding of and enjoyment of the plot. And this is a single POV. We follow the main guy, whose name I don't even remember. I think one of them's named Oliver, but I also don't think that's the main character's name. But the main guy, whose perspective we get, he's fine, he's funny. He is the son of a very popular rock star who kind of like left his mom and hasn't been talking to him in a while, and then his dad kind of reaches out to him, and so he's dealing with that. But it's also about this romance, and so he is fake dating. It's a fake dating romance trope. So he starts fake dating this very like put together adult guy. He's like a barrister or a lawyer or something. I don't really know what it means. It takes place in England, but he's like some kind of law person. So he's got his life together. He starts fake dating this guy to look more presentable in the public eye to help him at work, because like his dad being like a former drug addict rock star and him kind of being like a messy, not put together 20 something, he starts dating this guy to get advantages at work. The ending with like the whole like dad plot, it wasn't believable to me. Like to a certain extent it was, but also at the same time by the end it felt unnecessary for the romance. Like it felt like it was just like filler to make the book longer, because it didn't really add anything to it by the time you get to the end and realize like, oh, this really didn't mean anything. It's definitely a slow burn and super light on the steam. Like I would give this like a 1.5 chili peppers steam rating, if you will. Good, not great. Glad I read it. I wouldn't recommend it to people who don't read a lot of romance, you know what I mean? Or people who are getting newly into romance. Like as someone who doesn't read a lot, I'm very picky in particular, and I don't think that this like fits my expectations or my standards of romance personally. But if you really like romance, I think it's a good romance. It's a great male romance, and it's very funny. So if you like funny books, definitely it has my stamp of approval in the funniness category. After that, we got to good romance. My girl, my babe, Chloe Leese. I just read her Christmas novella for my holiday romance reading vlog. If you want to see that, Chloe Leese and Talia Hibbert are my personal best of the best favorite romance authors. They write amazing dual POV romances and just really amazing romances in general. I like both of their writing styles. I like the characters. I like their plot. And I just like their writing. They are stellar. Both of them queens. So the next book that I read is With You Forever, which is the 4th book and the most recently published book in the Bergman Brothers trilogy. Or no, the Bergman Brothers series. So the Bergman Brothers series is a series that follows the 7 Bergman siblings. The first book is Only When It's Us. I reviewed that book in my summer wrap-up. So if you want to hear more about like the beginning of the series, definitely go watch that video or just try it out. So there will be 7 books. There are only 4 of them out. And this 4th book follows Rooney, who is best friends with the female love interest in the first book, and Axel, who is, I think, the oldest brother in the family. Like, I don't think he's the oldest. I think the sister is the oldest. This is like a marriage of convenience plot because Axel needs to access this trust fund or this amount of money that his uncle gifted him upon his passing away so that he can refurbish their family cabin without his family knowing that he's using his money to do so, but he cannot access that money until he's married. So he marries Rooney and they do like a little like marriage of convenience thing, but obviously they both have feelings for each other and it's just sweet and steamy and good, just like all of Chloe Leese's novels. And also there's excellent representation as per usual when it comes to Chloe Leese. Chloe Leese is an autistic individual, so all of her stories that feature autistic characters are own voices stories where she is presenting different people on the autism spectrum and how they live their life, how their life is, you know, made unique by their experiences with autism. And Axel is on the autism spectrum. You're getting to know him, and also then Rooney has IBS. So again, we're getting representation of chronic illness, which it's such great romance. Like, Chloe Leese's personal goal is to write romances for everybody, and including real people with real problems and real life illnesses and real life, you know, diagnoses. And I absolutely love and appreciate that she does that. Definitely, I would say 4 out of 5 on the spice scale. 4 chili peppers. I loved the cameo from Willett and Ryder, who are the main characters in book 1, and the rest of the family. I'm so excited for the next one because I think, okay, I cannot confirm, but at the end of every book, you kind of get a hint as to what the next one will be. So like in book 3, we get a hint that book 4 is going to be about Rooney and Axel, and so on and so forth. And I think that the 5th book is gonna follow one of the younger brothers, and I think it's gonna be a male-male romance, and I cannot wait. If it is, I am literally gonna shout from the rooftops. Like, I'm so excited. And I think it comes out in 2022. I can't wait. I'm gonna cry. I give this one 4 out of 5 stars. If you like slow burn romance, marriage of convenience, neurodiversity, and chronic illness representation, if you just like bingeable romance series, or like the trope of like following different people in a friend group or different siblings in a family, if you like that, like romances that are tied together by characters and like their relationships to each other, this is obviously great for that. If you like spicy romance and the grumpy sunshine trope, that's kind of makes an appearance in this one as well. Okay, next, I read the entire Girl Meets Duke series by Tessa Dare. So I had never read historical romance before, and I kind of just like on a whim started the audiobook for the Duchess Deal, and then I proceeded to listen to all 3 of them 3 days in a row. I listened to the Duchess Deal, and then the day after that I listened to the Governess Game, and then the day after that I listened to the Wallflower Wager. In one stretch of time. I just could not stop. They were really, really amazing. Loved them all so much. So the first one, the Duchess Deal, it is a historical romance. And they are like borderline bodice ripper erotica. Okay, so be prepared, alright? 5 out of 5 on the spice scale. And the Duchess Deal, like, literally has no chill. So the Duchess Deal is a marriage of convenience. Also, before I get into anything else, all 3 of these are dual POV. Chef's kiss, yes, thank you. We love it. We love the dual POV. Literally, don't ever write a romance if it's not dual POV. I'm not interested. So our main character is a seamstress, and she agrees to marry this duke who was supposed to be married to somebody else, and then I think, I don't remember exactly what happens. I think maybe it happens to him in the war, and he comes back and he has like scars all over his face. So it's kind of like Beauty and the Beast-esque in that way too, because everybody's like afraid of him and thinks he's so ugly, and so he confines himself to the home, and he needs an heir. So he makes a deal with this woman and says like, I know I'm gross, but if you, like, are okay with it and you want to marry me and have my heir, you can, like, have my fortune and, like, stay in my country home and just do your thing and live out your life. I just need an heir. And she agrees, and they obviously start to fall in love, and she loves him, and then he, like, has to, like, soften his heart to her and, like, trust again. I liked the storyline. I wasn't super in love with either protagonist as an individual. I liked their romance, and I liked the story, but personally, I liked their friends a lot more, and we get to see their friends in the next books, which is awesome. I want to try the series. This is the first book, so like I don't think it's so bad or so bland that you should skip it, but don't be put off by the series if you don't like this book. If you like serious spice in your romance, historical romance, Regency romance, light and fun romance, and marriage of convenience trope, check out the Duchess Deal. Then after that, immediately jumping to the Governess Game. This is my favorite of all of them that I read. So the Governess Game is about Alexandra and Gabe. I forget the main characters of the first book. I cannot remember their names, but this one is about Alex and Gabe. And Alex is like, she's really into astronomy. She's down on her luck. She needs a job, okay? And this Duke guy that she meets has 2 young wards who he has, like, taken into his home. They're, like, 2 young girls, and they need a governess. So she's like, okay, I'll be their governess. And he hires her, and then they start steaming it up and falling in love. The found family that, like, starts to form between like Alex and Gabe and these 2 young girls is so precious and so sweet. I absolutely loved it. It definitely elevated this book for me in my mind a lot. Again, it's super hot and spicy, forced proximity romance, like not really workplace romance, but like boss employee vibes because he hires her to be their governess. I really liked Alex's backstory, and I feel like we get a lot more backstory for her than we did for the characters in the previous books. I feel like it made her more likable and more like enjoyable to read. Her and Gabe's chemistry felt good too. Like it felt very like present and natural. Next I read The Wallflower Wager, which is the third book in the series and the last one that is published. There's gonna be a fourth one, but this is the last one that is out, and we follow Penelope, and her male love interest, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. So this is also really sweet, probably my second favorite. It's very like heartwarming, cute romance. Penny, our main character, is obsessed with saving animals. So she like takes in all of these strange animals. She has an otter, she has a goat, she has a hedgehog, she has chickens, she has cows. She's always taking cats, dogs, like any animals in that need a home, and she is like kind of like a spinster. Penny is so great as a main character. She's like delicate and sweet and amazing, but she's also like strong-willed and she knows herself and she won't let herself be pushed around. A duke moves in next door to her in this house that she lives in with her aunt, and he is trying to help her sell all of the animals because her aunt gives her an ultimatum. If she doesn't get rid of all of the animals, she's going to send her to live with her brother in the country. She's going to be separated from her friends and her independent life in this like urban area. So she teams up with her new broody duke neighbor, and he helps her sell all these animals and find them new homes, new happy homes, and get them adopted, and it's really cute and sweet. I will say trigger warnings for sexual assault and sexual abuse. But seeing that discussed in like this kind of romance, this one is definitely the most serious in that sense, where it's not all just like sweet, like steamy romance, historical fun. I love that whole series. I thought it was great. The Governess Game and The Wallflower Wager are my favorites, but the Duchess Deal is still good. I gave The Wallflower Wager a 4, and the Governess Game a 4, and the Duchess Deal a 3. After that, I read Ever After Always. This is actually the third book in the Bergman Brothers trilogy. I know it's weird. I read the fourth one first, but this one for me was really hard. I actually did not give this book a rating because this was a very, very hard book for me to read personally, but I'm also so happy that I did read it. So this is a romance story about the oldest sister in the Bergman brothers family and her husband. They've hit a very difficult, rough patch in their marriage, and in that sense it is very hard to read about their struggles and that they both love each other, and to get both of their perspectives and know that they love each other so much, but that there are still things in their life that are driving them apart, and to see them trying to come back from that and work together to come back from that is incredibly emotional and hard to read. But at the same time, it's so important to read and to see their communication and how the steps that they take help them to find their romance again and to find their love for each other in a new way and to move forward and to progress from that. It's really well written, and Chloe Leese does an excellent job with it. But at the same time, also, Aiden suffers from generalized anxiety disorder and catastrophizing, and as someone who also deals with both of those things, it's hard to read on page someone who's going through things that you've gone through, and to see that on page and to be forced to like confront that. So this was very hard to read, and for that reason I'm not going to rate it, but I still loved it. I still love the series, and I think Chloe Leese does an excellent job with this novel. There are definitely still like funny times and steamy moments, but for the most part it is it's a very, very intense read. Second to last book is Payback's a Witch by Lana Harper. This book I can sum up in one sentence. It is a new adult version of Halloween Town, but add a sapphic romance. It's good. It's not great. I don't love the plot, if I'm being honest, but basically we follow our main character, whose name I can't remember. God, I suck. Our main character comes back to this magical town after being gone for a very long time, and she's a witch, and so when she comes back she gets her magic back, but there's like this contest that happens every year between different families in the town for who has like the authority or the power or whatever, and this guy who is part of like the most powerful family has scorned many women. Okay, our main character dated him and he like dumped her because she wasn't good enough, and then he like sleeps with this other girl that she's friends with and stabs her in the back and cheats on her with another one of her friends. And so these three girls band together to get back at him and to help beat him so that he doesn't win this contest and doesn't have power anymore, because like he has it coming, right? So it's like this like revenge plot. I mean, the contest, like, it's fine. It's honestly kind of boring at times. Really, the only part of this that I did really kind of enjoy is like the sapphic romance, because two of the girls start to fall for each other while they are working to get back at this guy. So the bisexual rep is there, which is great. The sapphic romance, female-female romance is sweet, but it's also kind of boring, and like you do have to really suspend your disbelief, because like it takes place in the real world, but there's like this magical town, and like the town limits draw out this like center of power for these witches, and I don't know, it's corny, very, very low spice, probably a 2 on the spice scale. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. If you like the witchy Halloween romance vibe, definitely check it out. You know, it's a good read for October. Last, but certainly not least, I read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I read this for the Big 3 readathon, so if you want to see my thoughts on this, I'll have it, a link to that vlog where I break it down a little bit more for you, but I really liked this book. I was pleasantly surprised by it. It is single POV, and I do think it would be better if it were dual POV, but it's not so much of a problem for me that I didn't enjoy the book. I love that we see characters in the STEM field, women in the STEM field, BIPOC women in the STEM field. It's cool, and especially like the academia setting, as someone who wants to get a PhD, kind of cool to see the academic setting, even if it's not in an area that I would necessarily pursue. The friendships and the found family is really cute. Olive, who's our main character, is a grad student, and she like has her group of friends, and they live together, and they like have their traditions, and it's really sweet, and I love it. And so this is a fake dating romance too, and Olive decides that she needs to fake date somebody to convince her friend that she can date a guy who Olive has dated before. So Olive and this guy break up, and the guy really, really loves Olive's friend, but Olive can't convince them that she's actually okay with it, even though she is, because like they just feel like it's kind of crossing a line, which Olive understands and respects, but she also realizes how much they like each other and how much she doesn't really care about it. So she kisses this random guy in front of her friend to convince her that she's moved on. And that guy happens to be a very, very broody doctor in the department who has like a bad reputation for being like a hot-tempered, tough kind of a guy. And they start fake dating because it looks good for him that he like has settled down into a romance, so he's not seen as a flight risk for the department, and so they'll give him funding for his projects, and it's good for her because then she can convince her friend that they can date. And they start falling for each other, and it's so cute. It's so precious. Olive is so sweet and smart, and I really love her character. Trigger warnings for sexual harassment, but I think that Hazelwood does a good job of presenting the problematic and systematic issues in academia, and just in general in the world, of entitled white men and their desire and belief that they can use women and abuse them to get what they want, and then think that they're giving something in return. So be aware of that. That's a part of this book, but I thought that it was handled well. I would give it a 3 on the spice scale, probably. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. If you like the fake dating trope, slow burn romance, STEM, academia, Grumpy Sunshine vibes. That, my friends, is the end of this wrap-up. I have been sitting here for like an hour and 45 minutes. But thank you for sticking around. If you stuck around this long, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. It means the world to me. I love you all. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if that's your jam. And I hope to see you in my next video. Happy reading, happy writing, and happy living. Peace out.